Greetings everyone, this is Germane again. We have been presenting this video series for you, Journey Through the Galactic Heritage Cards. Before this video, there were several other videos that were presented, and we do recommend that you watch those before you watch this one, only to get the context of the information that we are sharing. In the last video, we talked about the emergence of consciousness into the physical realm, eventually expressing itself through humanoid bodies. We also talked about the very early Lyran civilizations and their movement into the physical world, their focusing more on the utilization of the energy of masculine principle, and how this focus on expressing in a masculine way began to create the seeds of polarity. We also reminded you that nothing is wrong with this. This is simply the agreement for the journey that you have taken into the physical realm, into separation, so that you could understand what separation was like and experience then reunification, reintegration, reawakening. So now we pick up on the next section of the Lyran cards. In your deck, they are labeled cards from the time stream of the present time stream. The last video we were referring to what we call past time stream. The time streams on the cards for the physical civilizations are really referring to eras. So the last video, being that the time stream was labeled past, it's referring to what we would call first era Lyran consciousness. And that was the very beginnings of their civilization, the very beginnings of their focus on the masculine principle. This video is exploring the time stream of present, so to speak, which we use to refer to second era Lyran consciousness. So this is an era then where the Lyran consciousness, as it is expressed through humanoid beings, began to develop characteristics that were hallmarks or signatures of the Lyran beings. And because, as we've said in the previous video, that humanity also has a lot of these same traits and patterns from your Lyran forefathers, this particular section is really important, not only to look at the history of your forefathers, but also to look at the current challenges of humanity on Earth now. So that's why this section is very interesting, because there's very strong parallels between this ancient Lyra era and current time on Earth. Okay, so let's look then at the first card in this second era Lyran consciousness. It's card number 15, and the theme is courageousness. Now, obviously, this probably is not much of a surprise, given what we said in the last video about how these very early Lyran beings, somewhat being alone in their expansion outward into the galaxy, had to have kind of that pioneering spirit or that inner strength to allow them to go into the unknown and to forge their way into an unknown jungle, so to speak. So this is where the idea of courageousness was born in the Lyran psyche, because it didn't matter if there was fear, they had to forge ahead anyway. A side note here. We made a comment in the last video about how some of your Lyran forefathers were very influential in ancient days on Earth. And we're not really going to take this tangent too much, but what we do want to say is that you can see the stamp of your past forefathers through the mythology and symbols that are used on your planet. And there are a few in particular that we wish to point out to you. One is the symbol of the lion or the cat, mostly lion. And this was very often what you might call the totem or the symbol for the Lyran lineages that came to Earth. So if you look around some of the ancient sites on your world, and even what you call the royal family on your planet uses a crest with a lion. And you also have the idea that lions are courageous. All right? This comes deliberately from your very, very ancient Lyran forefathers. And the lion was used as a way to embody that consciousness or that energy so that you could understand the nature of these forefathers of yours. So if you're doing a reading then for yourself and the card of courageousness comes up, how can you interpret it? Well, it really depends, of course, on the question you've asked, the other cards in the deck, etc. But generally speaking, you're going to find that it could be referring to a fundamental characteristic of you that comes from ancient days, ancient lifetimes. Maybe it's something you already know or something that you're being asked to tap into. It may also be a message telling you that perhaps you do need to look within and find the courageousness and allow the courageousness to be stronger than the fear. So if you allow yourself to listen to that inner voice, you will know what the interpretation is for you according to the question you've asked and the cards that are in the reading. Okay, let's look then at another characteristic of the ancient Lyran forefathers in the second era. And we move to card number 16. The theme of this card is protectiveness. So what does this mean? Well, on the surface, you know what protectiveness means. And to some degree, it's connected to the last card of courageousness. If you look at the idea of a mother lion protecting her cubs, that is very much of the energy that these ancient Lyrans carried, of fierce protectiveness of each other. Okay, now that, though, is an outward characteristic. What about an inward characteristic? How is protectiveness referred to more on the inner levels? Well, they were also very good at self-protection. Now, this can be positive or negative depending on the way you look at it. But generally, you see it now, if we are to look at this idea as it plays out on Earth now, very often the human ego has created very strong boundaries around itself to protect itself from the things it does not want to see. So, if you have received this card of protectiveness in a reading, then you're being asked to look at some of the fundamental characteristics of your nature. One, are you protective with those around you? If so, is it too much? Is it smothering? Or are you not protective enough? But at a deeper level, it is asking you to look as well. Are you overprotective of the safety and security of your ego and not willing to look at the things you don't want to see? So this is a really important card in terms of the evolution of consciousness on your planet, because as we've said, humans carry a lot of the old patterns of your Lyran forefathers. Thus, you carry the pattern of trying to protect yourself against against things you don't want to see. This willingness to, in a sense, crumble the walls of protectiveness around you and allow the things in you don't want to see, that is the only way that will bring change into your reality. Now, of course, we're talking on the individual level. We're also talking on the mass conscious level as well. Right now on your planet, there is in terms of the mass consciousness, there's a big battle between those that want to move forward into change, even if it's scary, and those who are desperately clinging to old ways and not wanting to look at the truth that surrounds you. So this card is really a very important message if it comes up in a reading, because the protectiveness idea can be a major obstacle toward progress and toward evolution. So keep that in mind. This was one of the reasons why the Lyrans took a very long time in their evolution, because they were so self-protective. They did not want to see themselves clearly, and they resisted change at every opportunity. So in terms of the time that is measured for a civilization to awaken, the Lyrans took the longest of anyone in your galactic family. Mostly for this reason, but also, logically speaking, being that they were really the first group without a lot of other physical mentors, they had to forge their way through the jungle on their own, so to speak. So it is not quite surprising why it would have taken them the longest. But all the lessons they have learned in their awakening, because they eventually did awaken, are also available to you through the hologram of consciousness to help you awaken as well. So then we go to the next card here, which is, again, we are in the second era present of the Lyran. Number 17, pushing the envelope. And for those of you perhaps that are not native English speakers, you might not know what that means. It simply is a term that refers to pushing yourself beyond limits or beyond reasonable limits. So if you look again in the context of the Lyran civilization being these pioneers, it often, in order to navigate through reality in the unknown, they had to push themselves. They had to push themselves beyond what they might call their limits in order sometimes even to survive. So when you have a person on an individual level or a species on a group level who continually live their lives in that mode of being, push, 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 it becomes very difficult to let go and live a different way. So just like what we said previously about the protectiveness aspect of the Lyran consciousness being a big obstacle toward their awakening, this idea of the pushing of the envelope for the Lyrans was also another one of their obstacles toward their awakening. Because, again, it goes back to the video before this when we talked about the masculine principle idea. The masculine principle, which was the mode of operation for the Lyrans, was very much focused on external reality and exerting the will. Pushing the envelope is very much also expressing that masculine principle of push, 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 and attempting to control reality. So, if you've gotten this card in a reading, well, we've seen people get this card in reading and sometimes they just laugh because they see their own reflection in the card very much. If you get the pushing the envelope card in your reading, it could be a message to you of your habitual nature of doing that, and that perhaps it's time to begin to cultivate a new way of being, moving more from masculine principle into more of a balanced principle of integration of masculine and feminine energy. Once again, as we said in the previous video, we're not talking about gender in any way, because everyone has male and female energy within them. We are simply talking about the qualities of energy. You can refer to the last video for a further definition about that. So if you get the pushing the envelope in a reading, it could be telling you that it's time to take the foot off the gas, so to speak, and learn a different way. Or it could be telling you the opposite as well, which is that you are resisting using a natural mechanism within you to navigate physical reality. There might be a little bit of fear of stepping forward, or fear of going out and being seen. So you will have to then interpret what the card means for you in terms of your question and in terms of the surrounding cards as well. But pushing the envelope, that was very, very much of Lyran characteristic. You see this on Earth now in humans, and up until now, the idea of pushing and working all the time and all of that was seen as an admirable trait. But you are now starting to learn the cost of that trait. And very often the cost of that trait is your sanity and your health and your well-being and your heart. So it is time to really begin to reevaluate your relationship to that card. All right, now, last card. Again, we are in second era Lyra consciousness, and we have card number 18, which is the card, the theme of arrogance. Up until now, in all that we've spoken about regarding Lyran consciousness, you probably can quite understand why this card was included in the deck. Because very often when you continually use the masculine energy and you continually push and push and push and push the envelope and empower the ego, so to speak, it creates a form of arrogance in which you begin to think only you know the right way. Only you know the truth. Everyone else perhaps is stupid. And you see that playing out on your world now. This was one of the biggest obstacles for the ancient Lyrans. They became very arrogant. Once again, because they did not have the contrast of other species. They did not have to learn, so to speak, coexistence with other species in the same way you do. Then they automatically began to assume the attitude of, well, they do know everything because they are the most advanced beings in their reality. This got them in a lot of trouble, and it also was one of the factors in slowing down their awakening process. Once again, because you are so connected to the Lyran forefathers, this is also a stumbling block for humankind as well. And this arrogance can be the downfall of the human race if you don't more quickly learn the lesson about it than your Lyran forefathers did. We don't really need to go more in depth with that in terms of your planet. You got it, you know what we're talking about. Now, if this card comes up in your reading, then what does it mean? Well, it's asking you to go deep within and to look truthfully within yourself about where you might be very rigid about your belief systems. And it's kind of like a blind spot in a car. You can't really see the blind spot in order to acknowledge that it even exists. And this is true for arrogance. Arrogance is very much the human blind spot, so to speak. And to some degree, most humans have it here and there. So if this card comes for you in a reading, ask yourself, either are you being subjected to the arrogance of another? And if that is the case, then have compassion for them because they are lost in their own blind spot? Or are you subject to the arrogance of yourself, which is what is keeping you stuck? And if that is the case, have compassion for yourself for being stuck in your own blind spot. So this arrogance card then is the last card in the second era Lyra consciousness. Later in future videos, we will be moving into the third era of Lyran consciousness, which is the era of their awakening. But it's not for a while yet, because they got stuck here for a very, very long time. And it is our hope, wish, that you all can see into your own blind spots and not follow in the footsteps of your Lyran forefathers. We trust that though you might be mired in here for a short time, that you will move quickly through it, because you have the benefit of all the experience of the other aspects of your galactic family within your holographic memory. You will not spend as much time in arrogance as your Lyran forefathers. All right, so the next video series, we will be moving into the split that happened from the Lyran civilizations into the civilizations we've called Vegan. We'll talk about why that split happened, what it means, and how it really helped to plant the seeds even more of polarity, so that the one consciousness could experience itself moving deeper and deeper into polarity for a very significant purpose. So Vega will be next. Thank you very much for your attention, and until next time, much love.